There's been new release of emails that let us know that when the CDC director said this.
Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick, and that it's not just in the clinical trials, but it's also in real world data.
So when she said that, she was lying. She wasn't getting it wrong. She was lying. That's what she looks like when she's lying. She's a liar and a criminal, and she should be in jail just like Fauci and Collins and the rest of those people and Big Pharma. And how do we know this? Well, new emails show COVID vaccine mandates were based on a lie. New documents indicate the entire justification for vaccine mandates was based on a falsehood. Remember when I debated vaccine mandates on this show with my friend comedian Graham Elwood? How you could not know that the government was lying every which way to Sunday about COVID and the vaccines at that time. So now we have the proof. I always knew it would come out, and here it comes out. New documents indicate the entire justification for vaccine mandates was based on a falsehood, and that public health officials knew it. Now, I can forgive my friend Graham for being wrong about that. In fact, I never even was mad at him for being wrong about that people have different opinions. He was propagandized and repeated it. But they will never forgive me for being right about COVID. Ever. Ever. No matter how much proof comes out. None of them are doing videos about it. None of them are doing videos about how COVID was a hoax and how we were all lied from beginning to end about it. How it was never a threat to healthy people under 70 years old.
None of them would have you on the show.
No. Nobody. They don't have me on their shows to apologize to me for getting it wrong and to congratulate me for having the courage to stick my chin out and tell the truth. Can you imagine missing the biggest? You do an independent news show, you miss the biggest story of your life. Not only do you miss it, but you get it 100% wrong, which is what 99% of YouTube did, except for this show and the Gray Zone and Kim Iverson.
Convo Couch.
Convo Couch. So I guess that would be the 1% of YouTube.
Yeah.
Emails obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request show that CDC Director Rochelle Walensky and former NIH Director Francis Collins were aware of and discussed breakthrough cases of COVID in January. So what you saw, that video of her was from like June, right when the vaccines became widely available. So they knew from the start. They also knew that Pfizer never even tested to see if their vaccine stopped transmission. They never even tested to see that. You wouldn't know that watching the news or listening to Fauci or Collins or Walensky talk or anybody talk about it. You wouldn't know that. You would think they did do that testing and that it's a vaccine that's going to stop the transmission. That's what I thought when I took it. In her email, Walensky says that clearly it is an important area of study, links to a study, and then links to a study raising the issue and assures the person she is sending it to that Dr. Anthony Fauci is looped into these conversations. So they all knew this. However, in public, Walensky was saying something quite different. 2 months after discussing this data, she said vaccinated people don't carry the virus and don't get sick. So that was, maybe that video was from March or April. I have more video to show you, believe me. In a congressional hearing, after it became clear that people were able to get infected with COVID even after receiving the vaccine, she defended her original statements by claiming it was true at the time she said it. Namely for the strains that we're dealing with in early 2021. We now know that was not true and that Walensky herself knew it was not true.
The vaccine did not stop spread or infection. I'm not saying it was completely bad, but it did not stop stop the spread or infection.
I think actually, if I could actually just correct that point, and that is initially it did. For the Wuhan strain and for the Alpha strain, all of the early data and the literature published in the New England Journal demonstrated that for those who worked, if you didn't get infected, that you were not transmitting it to other people, and it had very high efficacy early on, up to 96%. So
and
it
that's part
did
of
change over time.
No, the bald guy. What was he doing? This guy?
Yeah, he was kind of like at the very beginning.
Oh yeah. Let me play that again.
Vaccine did not stop spread or infection. I'm not saying it was completely bad, but it did not stop the spread or infection.
I think actually, if I could actually just correct that point, and that is initially it did. For the Wuhan strain and for the Alpha strain, all of the early data and the literature published in the New England Journal demonstrated that for those.
So she's lying. Jay Bhattacharya, a professor of Stanford School of Medicine, called the revelation stunning. He pointed out that despite this knowledge, they continued to push vax mandates anyway. In June of 2021, Joe Biden's head of COVID response, Andy Slavitt, tweeted out that everyone's going to get COVID no matter what. That if you're vaccinated or not, everyone's going to get it. And they still kept telling you, they still kept pushing mandates. I didn't have that debate with my friend Graham until later that year, after Andy Slavitt had already said everybody's going to get it anyway. Doesn't matter if you vaccinate everyone, everyone's going to get COVID. That's what Andy Slavitt said. Joe Biden's director of COVID response said that in June of 2021. So they knew this. And they continued to push mandates anyway. This is the real scandal. And there is little harm in getting something like this wrong in a vacuum. After all, COVID-19 vaccines certainly saved many, many, many lives and reduced the severity of infection for many more. That's what they say. But the fact that vaccine mandates were pushed, even though those in charge knew people could contract and spread the virus while vaccinated, is indefensible. So if they always knew that everybody was going to get COVID, which they did, you can't justify making someone take a vaccine, mandating a vaccine, because at that point, the vaccine just becomes about yourself. They sold the vaccines on the fact that if you got vaccinated, it was for the community. So now you wouldn't spread it to someone else and they wouldn't catch it. That was always what they told us. That validated mandates. Well, they always knew that everybody's going to get it. They misled the public on this, makes it even worse. If the vaccine stopped COVID dead in its tracks, as Fauci explained, then the decision to institute a vaccine mandate would merely be a controversial yet ultimately legitimate public health measure. The fact it did not, even if it did, I would still be against mandates. Even if that vaccine did stop that virus dead in its tracks, I would still be against vaccine mandates. Bodily autonomy, my body, my choice. There isn't an exception for that, except if I get really scared. Then it's someone else's choice. The fact that it did not do that, I mean, stop the spread and the transmission, did not stop COVID dead. The fact that it did not stop COVID dead, but rather had primarily personal benefits, completely removes the justification for mandates. That's exactly what I just said and what I had been saying all along. The Biden administration tried to impose a vaccine mandate on employers. Thousands of people were fired from their jobs. 70,000 healthcare workers in New York State alone were fired from their job during COVID. They lost their livelihoods over a lie. Those people have since been reinstated by the Supreme Court of New York State. But the big pharma got that governor in New York, who's completely corrupted by big pharma, to fire 70,000 healthcare workers. And people didn't get torches and march to the Capitol and throw her out of the governor mansion for doing that. 70,000 healthcare workers. The Biden administration tried to impose a vaccine mandate on employers. Thousands of people were fired from their jobs. Oh, by the way, those people who got fired in New York, the 70,000 healthcare workers, they got replaced by National Guard workers who were unvaxxed. Just so you know. And there was a time when unvaccinated people were not even allowed into restaurants in some of the country's largest cities. That's for true. I thought that was everywhere. And it was all based on a lie. Every time you had to show your vaccine card at a restaurant, it was all a lie. That was a lie. I never had to show my vaccine card to get on a plane. Isn't that weird? I never had to show my vaccine card to get on a plane.
Or to get in that airport.
Or to get into the airport. Isn't that weird? There must be a substantive reckoning within our public health institutions and government, more generally in the aftermath of the pandemic. Spoiler alert, there is none. There is none. None. Because that would have to come from the media, would have to put pressure on, but the media is owned by Big Pharma. They're not going to reform themselves. From vaccines to masks to schools to economic aid, it seems that each aspect of the pandemic was accompanied by its own set of lies and distortions. There is a reason trust in our institutions has taken such a hit in recent years, and it's not because of Joe Rogan and Jimmy Dore. It's because people like Fauci, Walensky, Collins, and everybody who has a cable news show except Tucker Carlson lied to you about vaccines, mandates, COVID, lockdowns, research, the truth. You were lied to, 100%. Remember when every news station made you think ivermectin was poison and it was for horses and y'all were a redneck dummy if you took it? Turns out that was just 100% propaganda. 100%. And they all pushed it. Rachel Maddow pushed it in a tweet, still up. If those in charge do not at some point recognize what they did, commit not to do it again. Why would they not do it again? Why would they commit to not do it again? There's no downside for them doing this. And actually act differently next time they are in a similar situation, then institutional trust will continue to get worse. Well, it's going to continue to get worse, as we saw Dr. Hotez was running from a simple a debate about his ideas on vaccines on a public forum with one of the world's leading environmental lawyers, which is RFK Jr. You know, when you go to sue a doctor, you don't bring another doctor, you bring a lawyer, because a lawyer knows how to question a doctor. Okay, so again, isn't it amazing to see nobody in Hollywood have the balls, almost nobody in Hollywood to have the balls to say this is crazy? Tim Robbins did. Tip of the hat to Tim Robbins, but I'm not in his orbit of celebrity status, so he has to pretend I don't exist, which is nice. Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, Rosemont, and Chicago, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, and more, and St. Louis. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all our tickets for all our shows.